As an exploratory study, it also provided insights into the benefits and limitations of using mobile eye tracking in the museum. So after I present a brief summary of my research, I want to present some video and talk a little bit about what those benefits and limitations are. Nope, still not forwarding. No, okay. My fault. Before we get started, a couple of definitions. Okay, a couple of definitions might be useful. Visitor studies, at the heart of visitor studies research is an understanding of how, what visitor expectations are for the museum visit and whether or not those expectations are being met. Tools used in visitor studies research are borrowed from the fields of market research and anthropology and include small group interviews or focus groups. One traditional method of collecting visitor data is through unobtrusive or covert observation, in which visitors are not aware that their actions are being observed by the researcher. Researchers collect data about two indices: time spent in the space and the number of stops made at exhibit elements. These tracking and timing studies allow development of general patterns of movement through the museum and help museum staff document and understand how visitors experience the museum, with the goal of improving the educational outcomes of the museum experience by understanding how visitors allocate their time. Russian scientist Alfred Yarbus is credited as the founder of modern eye movement research. Yarbus's method for collecting eye motion data that utilized a contact lens-like device with a suction cup that attached to the eye was considered revolutionary in eye motion research. And his investigation was one of the first attempts to understand the relationship between high-level cognition and eye movement. And I liken that to sort of poking yourself in the eye with your mascara. That had to just really be painful. Yarbus and subsequent researchers found that observers' patterns of vision are not random, but rely on their cognitive goals and past experiences. And that gaze patterns for viewers who were asked to find specific elements in an image, their gaze pattern went first to the area of the image where that information might be located. Okay. For the study, data was collected using Pupil Labs' invisible mobile eye tracking glasses, which recorded both video and audio elements of the visitor experience. The glasses used two cameras, and you can see one here. There's actually one on both sides. The first camera focuses a beam of infrared light at the pupil, and the second camera records what the visitor is looking at. And then those video files are merged to overlay the pupil movement over what the viewer is seeing. The data is stored as an MP file on a handheld device and can be downloaded to specialized software for analysis. In addition to collecting data through the mobile eye tracking device, I also administered pre and post interviews to collect information about whether visitors had visited before and what they remembered from their visit. Okay. After explaining the purpose of the visit and obtaining informed consent, glasses were fitted to the participant, and the participant was instructed on how to use the device. A short pre-interview was administered, and with questions about the visitor expectations and previous experience in the museum. Participants were instructed to move about the galleries at their own pace and to return the device at any time. At the end of the visit, I collected the device and administered a short follow-up interview to find out what participants remembered and what they felt they might have learned during the visit. Data was transferred from the device to secure data storage here at the university and also uploaded to the iMotion software for subsequent analysis. Okay. The study was conducted at the Evansville Transportation Museum, located adjacent to the Evansville Museum of Art, History, and Science, over several weeks in the late summer of 2024. A convenient sample was used. Any participant who entered the museum on the day the study was being conducted were eligible. All participants over the age of 18 and anyone who didn't need to use eyeglasses for corrective vision were eligible to participate. Although if you wore contact lenses, you could participate. It was a limitation of the glasses. A total of 11 visitors took part in the study. 3 were eliminated due to equipment failure, leaving 8 participants. 4 participants visited the inside galleries of the Transportation Museum, and 4 participants visited the train. And participants ranged in age from young adult to older adult, and included 5 men and 3 women. Most of the participants, about 75%, indicated that they had learned at least a little bit. One indicated that she had learned a lot, and she spent a great deal of time reading the text in the exhibit. And another indicated that she had not learned much, and she had the shortest visit of any of the participants. Most of the visitors did not give education as the reason for visiting on that day. However, education and entertainment can coexist as outcomes. And in the best of outcomes, the museum provides a transformative experience that exceeds the benefits of either simply education or entertainment. Okay. So as for the benefits of using mobile eye tracking in the museum, current mobile eye tracking glasses are considered the 4th generation and allow for real-world collection of data. So participants are able to wear the glasses and move freely about the gallery. Earlier versions required that participants be seated stationary in front of an image. Fortunately, that's no longer the case. And we're going to show a video here if I can make this work. There we go. This video shows the search, approach, and stop pattern of visitor movement through the galleries that maximizes the utility of the visit. The orange line is the visitor's gaze line, so the motion of their pupil. And you can see from this video that they appear to be reading. The eye movement moves from left to right over the text of the label, which is good news for all curators, because curators wonder, do people actually read the labels? So it's good news to find out that they do. Okay, next. The second benefit is that we are able to collect a macro view of the visitor experience. Data collected by the mobile eye tracking device explores learning at the macro level by capturing visitors' attention as they move freely through the galleries, rather than focusing on specific elements. Okay. This table shows the distribution of element gaze time, and you can see that there are 3 basic elements in the gallery: text, artifacts, and interactive elements, or elements with which the visitor engaged in some way, engaged physically in some way. And most of the participants spent the majority of their time simply walking through and gazing at the gallery, not focusing on any one specific element. But that doesn't necessarily indicate that they weren't engaged with the exhibit, but rather that they were more broadly fixated on the entire experience. Okay. This section of video demonstrates both macro and micro gazes as the participant's view first passes over the elements and then begins to focus on specific text in the label. The macro view is referred to as wandering along, as with the vehicles, or window gazing when looking at elements inside the case or behind glass, like you would if you were window gazing at the mall or at a shopping center. And here you can see he's actively reading or it appears that he's actively reading that text. And I happen to remember that this participant was interested in racing bicycles. So this part of the exhibit he clearly makes a connection between what he's reading and what's on exhibit in the museum. And then he goes on to actually look at the image of the bicycles and then to look at the bicycles themselves. So you can kind of see the progression of his engagement. And even though he'd spent very little time looking at the steamboats in the case, he did reference the steamboats in his exit interview, which indicates that in some way he did engage with that information, even though he spent no time focused directly on that information. Okay. We can go to the next one. There we go. Another benefit is that we are able to obtain the micro view. If you were doing simply a visitor observation as a researcher in the traditional manner, you would try not to catch the attention of the participant or of the visitor. And so you would have to stand at some distance from them and watch what they were doing. And at that distance, you probably would not be able to track what their eyes were actually looking at. But with the mobile eye tracking, we can identify exactly what they're looking at and how long they spend looking at each element of the exhibit. Okay. In this section of video, you can again see that the participant appears to be reading the text. And it's a little offset because of the location of this text was above and at a distance from where the visitor was standing. And as they read the text, they then look to the image to find confirmation of what they're reading. So that reflects Yarbus's findings that when they're given instruction or information about something, they then look for that element in the image rather than just gazing sort of randomly at what's in front of them. And you can also see from the blue circle where they begin and where they end their focus on this particular. So you can see at that point, the focus had moved away from that panel onto the next panel, which is an advantage for trying to understand how long they spent looking at any one part of the exhibit. Okay. This is an actual image of what that video was recording. So you can see what the participants were looking at, what they were reading and what they were looking at. And two of the visitors to the train indicated that the process of moving the train from wherever it existed to the museum was new information for them. So again, you can see that visitors do connect to and engage with what's in the exhibit and hopefully learn something as a result. Okay. Again, this demonstrates the approach, stop, and the survey, approach, and stop process that visitors use when they examine their surroundings. And you can see how in this image, he also appears to be reading the text. In the next image, you can go to the next one. This is, again, on the left, what he was looking at, and a heat map on the right, which is an accumulation of participant views that show where their concentration was the most intense. So in the red and the yellow sections in that image, their gaze was the most intense, but they also their gaze moved above and below the text to find references for the information that they were reading. And Yarbus's research also determined that when multiple viewers look at the same image, their gaze pattern is similar, but not identical. So you can kind of see that too in the heat map. And just as important as what visitors do focus on is what they chose not to spend what they choose not to spend time looking at. So in this recording, the visitor spends almost no time reading the text and very little time actually glancing at any of the images in the gallery. Another of Yarbus's findings was that in the absence of specific instructions about what to look at, visitors are attracted to faces. And so you can see in her gaze pattern that she is attracted to the faces on the images. And also, as you'll see in a few minutes, or actually a couple seconds probably, she's attracted to the faces in the mural next to the large vehicles in the other gallery. And although she spent very little time focused on any one element of the gallery, she did in her exit interview refer to big vehicles and buildings that reminded her of someplace she had visited, like Chicago, which those were her words. And so again, you have an understanding that although visitors don't engage for very long with elements or even focus specifically on one element, they do make a connection between their own experiences, and they do have recollections of what they saw after the fact. Okay. One of the important benefits of using mobile eye tracking is that researchers are also able to record audio. So you can record visitor comments about the exhibit or between visitor conversations. So conversation between in-group participants or between visitors and someone else in the gallery staff, gallery guide, someone like that. So, okay. See if I can. Do I have sound? Maybe not. What he says is, oh, this is cool. And then he communicates with the other person there. Oh, look, you can see the outside. And then he says, she responds, oh, it's like something we saw someplace else. And then at the very end, he says, I like this. And he was one of the younger participants and also one of the only participants to really engage with this particular interactive exhibit, which I thought was really interesting. It's kind of a stereotypical age thing here. Okay. Okay, we can go to, there we go. And new technology that has come out since the data was collected for this study also allows for the measurement of visitor emotional responses to what they're seeing. So you can not only record what they're seeing, but are they excited by this? Are they bored? You know, how do they feel about what it is that they're seeing? So all of those would be quite valuable information for museum practitioners. You certainly don't want visitors to be bored in the gallery. Okay, next one. And there are limitations to the use of mobile eye tracking in the museum. As I said, this is not covert or unobtrusive. Visitors know they're being observed, and you know that when you observe something, it changes the nature of it. Visitors might change their behavior for a number of reasons. They might spend longer in the gallery because they want to please the researcher or because they want to appear more engaged than they actually are. They might spend less time in the gallery because they're uncomfortable being observed, and so they just want to get this over with. So there are a number of reasons that they might change their behavior. This might not be actual normal behavior. There are assumptions about fixations and cognition. So it's important to remember that Attention is not cognition. The assumption that spending more time gazing at something leads to learning has not been proven. As I mentioned before, there are technological malfunctions. 3 of the participants' recordings were not usable, and I never did really figure out why that was. But as you can tell, I'm not really all that computer literate. So that and the process is both time intensive and expensive. The equipment requires quite a commitment of resources, and most museums just don't have the ability to fund visitor studies research at that level. And finally, there are some ethical concerns about privacy related to collecting personal biometric data, collecting and storing personal biometric data. Okay. Limitations notwithstanding, this study demonstrates that the potential use of mobile eye tracking to inform museum practice is valuable, and it suggests several avenues for future research. To begin with, this sample was very homogeneous, all white, all of a sort of mid-age range, all English. I think one maybe was not a native English speaker, but for the most part, very similar. One suggestion for future studies is to include a more diverse population. Some studies have explored visitor differences, so compared children and adults, or experts and amateurs in the field. Including studies with mobility or low vision issues would be helpful to understand what the limitations are in the way the information is being presented, and are all visitors being served equally? And we know that that's probably not the case. Students and educators would add depth to understanding how the museum as an institution can better serve the educational community, which is something that museums are interested in doing. Another avenue would be active participation. So asking participants to actively engage in the study by narrating the visit as they move through the gallery, or by commenting on the video, sitting with the researcher and commenting about what it was they were thinking, or why it was that they were interested in that particular element, would be very useful and provide rich insight and immediate feedback about the visitor experience. Following up on Yarbis's work, giving visitors specific tasks and asking them to look for specific elements based on maybe the goals of the exhibit would provide immediate feedback on whether or not the exhibit was meeting its educational intentions. And then also following up after the visit with visitors, maybe 6 months to a year. Do you remember the visit? Do you remember what you learned? Have your attitudes or ideas changed since that time? Has anything happened that reinforced or challenged what you learned during that exhibit? Mobile eye tracking technology is developing rapidly, and new capabilities have been developed since the time that I conducted this study. And the use of mobile eye tracking to record and analyze data, analyze visitor experiences, is a valuable tool for exploring how learning takes place in the museum. So thank you. You can go to the last screen, I guess. And I would be glad to answer your question.
I just wanted to compliment how you utilize the technology to extract all that very useful data, and I can just imagine how museums are really going to take advantage of this type of process.
One of the benefits of this is that, you know, it kind of sets a sample for, although the museum itself may not be able to afford or commit the resources to this project, they can partner with universities, as they have done several times with Dr. Milowitz in the College of Business, or with other museums, to maybe make that process more affordable. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
I mean, I totally appreciate, you know, your comment about how expensive it would be like this for any museum to do it. But what's even more expensive is to take the results and modify significantly the exhibits on the basis of those results.
Right.
A couple of weeks ago, I went to Angel Mounds, the interpretive.
They've
center.
done wonderful new
It's the first time
renovation.
I've been there
Yeah.
since they redid it, and I've been many times before, and it is so dramatically different and so significantly better.
Yeah.
But that took a lot of time and it cost a lot of money. But
Yes, it did.
it also underscored for me how significantly we consume information in a different way than we did a generation or even more ago. So I guess to that, the question I have about the museum in which your study occurred was, do you know how long ago those exhibits in their current state were put together? Because I think it's been a while.
It has been a while. I don't know specifically. I did try to find some history on that part of the museum, but I wasn't very successful. And even tried to read those, those images to see if I could figure out. It looked like they were maybe from the 70s, 80s, just based on clothing and that sort of thing. But I know that they are at this point thinking about making some modifications to that space. And so hopefully that I did send them my findings. Hopefully they'll be able to use that to help. And I think our expectations, as you mentioned, are so much higher than they were. We're no longer satisfied with just reading something and looking at pictures on the wall, but we want to engage with the information and engage with the artifacts themselves if we can. So I think, and that is costly, that is expensive.
Today, less text is preferred to
Yeah,
more text.
yeah.
The last time I was at the Training Museum was, I think, in September, and there's a lot of text.
There's a lot of
You can't
text.
see it.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's also, it's like teaching, when I stand up in front of a classroom, every one of my students learns differently.
Right,
Than
right.
the person to the right and left of them, and every individual that goes into a museum consumes the exhibits differently as well. On the
That's
basis of
true.
age or any other.
Or previous
difference.
experience, or, whether they've been there before, they may have something favorite they want to do. One of the suggestions I made was that there be alternative methods for presenting the information so that they could choose whether to read the labels or maybe to have an audio guide, or a lot of museums, I think, make those available on your phone. You can do some sort of an app on your phone. And so people don't have to read, they can listen. And I think that's something that we're more accustomed to doing these days.
I think it was interesting that it was only the one, you said there was just the one person that did an interactive
Right,
thing.
right.
Right, so like we have this expectation, we don't just want to read text, but then not only one person did
Yeah.
interactive.
Yeah,
I really love that you showed the videos, because Brian, like, we hear about this technology, and I've even toured the lab over there with the IRB, but I'd like to see what you got to see in terms of
Yeah.
what you're looking at, and to merge those two images with the glasses. That was really cool. I'm really glad you included that,
Thank
because
you.
I think it really brought it just sort of brought more to life for us, I think, as people in the audience, to see like this is what they saw, and here you can actually see how their eyes did.
yeah.
This is really cool.
And keep in mind that each one of those stops is a data point that has to be analyzed. So there's just a lot, even though there were only 8 participants, there was a lot of information. So thank you all so much. I appreciate it. And I hope that, we are going to have an AI lab in the atrium of the Romaine College Business and Engineering Center. So come over and visit that in the fall and see what's going on there. It should be interesting.
Thank you, Tina, and I have zero regrets for, coercing you into. It reminded me of the first talk I gave like this when I was a graduate student, and I had to use 2 slide carousels.
Oh, no.
With a little
Yeah.
plug into the carousel that didn't reach where I stood, so someone had to press the button.
I'm sorry, I can't say that. I have to go back to work.
Thank you.
It's not all. They don't know where I am.